It is time to discuss a very controversial, as well as too often misunderstood topic, and that is the question, what is the Scarlet Woman in Thelema? Or what is a Scarlet Woman? How can you be a Scarlet Woman? What does this all mean? And this is one of those topics that I see abused and misunderstood and just dragged across the coals, and I'm really disappointed with a lot of the conversations around this topic. And my final straw was, okay, I got this comment of someone asserting that I am a Scarlet Woman. Spoilers, I am not. I think it comes from a good place. It comes from a playful place, but it does point to a need for this topic to be discussed. So I'm going to discuss it with you all today. We're going to get into not only what is the Scarlet Woman, but also what does it mean to be a Thelemite woman, and what does the Book of the Law call you to do? And then we're going to get into some more advanced conversation about Crowley's understanding of the Scarlet Woman and the Beast and those relationships. I want to discuss too what Phyllis Seckler has to say about it, because I feel like she has some fantastic perspective, although perhaps a little bit outside of the range of what Crowley might say, which I think is really cool. So I hope you find it valuable. Unfortunately, I do not have time to dive into like slides and all of those beautiful animations I normally make for you all. But I do have lots of books to kind of show you visually on the screen, as well as quotes. So I'll be reading you direct quotes, and I have notes and stuff, but I just don't have time to make all of those beautiful slides I normally do. So I hope you forgive me on that. So let's get into it. The question is, what is the Scarlet Woman in Thelema? The Scarlet Woman is a spiritual office that is occupied or can be occupied by a person, a corporeal person in the world. Just like there is a spiritual office for the Beast. There are a lot of concepts within Thelema that are very abstract, and this refers to higher spiritually ascended positions or abstract positions. So these ideas of the Beast, the Scarlet Woman, Babylon, Baphomet, etc., you'll see throughout Thelemic literature. And they can be very difficult for very new people or first-time people to understand, but also perhaps some people have UPG, otherwise known as unverified personal gnosis, or choose to interpret these words and these concepts in a way that is not commonly understood by Thelemites or traditionally in line with how Crowley viewed it. And, you know, sometimes these people have platforms on the internet and they're like shouting it out there, and that's cool, you know, say what you're gonna say, but I think there is a need to return back to Crowley and these original texts and these original ideas so new people can understand what they mean and make up for themselves how they want to interpret them. Because if you don't have that original source material, that's going to be tough for you. And a lot of these books, like The Law is for All, where a lot of my quotes come from, which is Crowley's commentary on the Book of the Law, it's out of print, so that makes it hard. But I think there also is this larger conversation that I'm very, very interested into getting into about the role of women in Thelema and what it means to be a Thelemite woman, because quite frankly, you don't hear or see a lot of Thelemite women existing in the world. We aren't as widely published writing-wise as men, and our voices have been not represented like I think they should be, because women have always been a part of Thelema from its very inception. And there's a lot of amazing leaders throughout time, even when Crowley was alive. A lot of his students were women, and who have carried that amazing current into the present. So, and I think also these ideas like the Scarlet Woman, at least I have seen from my perspective, have been abused. They've been used to try to force women to do things and be something that they're not, which is not what Thelema is about. Thelema is do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. It means to know your will and then do it. Yeah, love is the law, but it is also love under will. So that's my little intro. All right, let me consult my notes of where we're going with this. Okay, yeah, first, what is the Scarlet Woman? So the Scarlet Woman is, again, the spiritual office that comes about in the central sacred holy text of Thelema, which is the Book of the Law. It is a channeled text, meaning it is not Crowley sitting down writing something as himself, but it's Crowley getting divine sourced information, and again, interpret that however you want to interpret divine, through an entity or being known as Iwas, which is some people consider it Crowley's holy guardian angel. Some people consider it the holy guardian angel of the Anne of Horus. You know, we're not going to get into that. But this book happened, right? And in this book, it lays out a lot of stuff. It's a beautiful text, by the way. Please go read the Book of the Law. Even better, read The Laws for All, which is Crowley's explanation of the Book of the Law. But anyway, so this idea of the Scarlet Woman is in there. And his wife, Crowley's first wife, Rose, she was considered to be the first Scarlet Woman, according to Crowley. And so Crowley, in his Confessions, has a list of all of the Scarlet Women up until Dorothy Olsen. So the list goes from Rose down to Leah Herzig. And then after Leah Herzig, it comes out that Dorothy Olsen is there, but like Crowley didn't list her. And this list, I'll put it on the screen for you all so you can see it with your eyes. This is a list that comes directly out of Crowley's Confessions. And again, there's more Scarlet Women that came after Leah Herzig in this spiritual role. But he doesn't, it gets complicated. And it's also complicated by the fact Wikipedia is wrong. Because Wikipedia includes people like, shoot, I'm blanking on her name, Lila Waddell. So it's a good example that, like, just because someone dated Crowley or even did magic with Crowley doesn't mean that woman was necessarily a Scarlet Woman. And that's a really important distinction, which I'll get into more. But like, just because you are a Thelemite woman or doing magic, even if you were doing magic with Crowley as a woman, it doesn't mean you're a Scarlet Woman. Scarlet women, again, are very specific people filling a very specific spiritual office or formula in relation to the beast, which that spiritual office during Crowley's life was held by him. So again, it's a spiritual office. Like, you just simply going on a date with Crowley did not mean you were going to be a Scarlet Woman. Even if you were an amazing woman, does not necessarily mean you were going to be a Scarlet Woman. And so, yeah, again, Lila Waddell, she was an incredible person in Crowley's life and intimately involved with Crowley, did sex magic with him, and she even helped bring the rites of Eleusis alive with her music. But she was never a Scarlet Woman, and I would argue that the Wikipedia page completely gets that wrong. So, yeah. So we kind of explored what that means. And then it is also complicated by the fact that a lot of people have a lot of opinions about what definition-wise a Scarlet Woman is. And so sometimes they add more women to the list that Crowley didn't consider Scarlet Women, and they also subtract some. But again, those are going by various standards and people's ideas on that. I'm just going to stick to Crowley's list in his Confessions, plus Dorothy Olsen. I think those are the most, I don't know, straight to the fact ones. So then the question is next, what were the Scarlet Women? What were they doing? And the Scarlet Women were more than just muses. So what is a muse? The muse was where a woman, typically a woman, serves in a passive role to inspire a man in his work, whether artistic or otherwise. So these Scarlet Women were far from passive. They had a very active role as a force of change and a conduit of the current of the current Aeonic power. So the women who served in this role of Scarlet Woman were really forces of nature in and of themselves. They were women making changes, they were sparks, they were sources of light in this world, and they challenged the stereotypical feminine mold of the Victorian era. So in the it's very important to remember the context in which these women lived. So you were expected in the Victorian era to be, within British society, to be modest, demure, family-oriented, and for the most part, uneducated. However, the women that served as the Scarlet Women were far from that. They were educated, and they challenged the stereotypical feminine mold. So I'm going to rattle off some examples for you all of the Scarlet Women or some examples that, of ways they sort of rocked the status quo. And these examples come from Perdurabo, which is a fantastic biography of Aleister Crowley written by Richard Kaczynski. So Mary Destiny, she was the first Scarlet Woman after Rose, and she was a free spirit and often dressed in sandals and Greek tunics, which was very scandalous for the Victorian society at the time. And additionally, she was an entrepreneur and started her own perfumery called Maison d'Este. Moving on to Jean Robert Foster. She was a literary editor at the American Review of Reviews, and she wrote poetry. Roddy Minor, otherwise known as the Camel, was actively involved in the women's rights movement, and she protested for women to have the right to vote. So she was out there making political statements and political changes. In addition, she held a doctorate at Columbia University's New York College of Pharmacy and worked professionally as a chemist. Marie Rowling, she was a traveling lecturer on Russia. And Bertha Bruce owned a boarding house in Detroit and helped finance the publication of Blue Equinox. And I think this is a fantastic exploration of how these women embody divinity in direct opposition to what was happening at the time. And they also had a radical embrace of their sexuality, and they rejected a lot of societal expectations of modesty and monogamy. This is something that's often not discussed, but everyone knows Crowley was out there being very experimental with his sexuality, his gender, but so were the women. And he actively encouraged his partners, whether male or female, to take on multiple partners just like he was. He's like, hey, I'm all about experimentation. I'm all about living my life, and I think you should too. So Crowley did not have a one man to rule them all mentality. There was very much this idea, which comes out of the Book of the Law, which is every man and every woman is a star. This idea that women were also stars on par with men. Now, obviously, British aristocrats like Crowley struggled to live by that at every moment of his life. He was far from perfect, but that idea is there in the central sacred holy text of Thelema, that idea of equality, that idea that divinity comes from embracing the starhood. The Book of the Law does not say every man is a star and women are subservient to him. That is not what is going on. And that is reflected, of course, in the Book of the Law itself, but also a lot of Crowley's writings on it. And so we go on to, where does this come from? We mentioned the Book of the Law. And so the Scarlet Woman and her position is elaborated in the Book of the Law. So I'm going to read you out of the 3rd chapter. This is line 43. And it is describing the role of the Scarlet Woman, or in other words, this spiritual office that one would possess as a Scarlet Woman. And it says, "Let the Scarlet Woman beware. If pity and compassion and tenderness visit her heart, if she leave my work to toy with old sweetness, Then shall my vengeance be known. I will slay me her child. I will alienate her heart. I will cast her out from men. As a shrinking and despised harlot shall she crawl through dusk-wet streets and die cold and hungered. But let her raise herself in pride. Let her follow me in my way. Let her work the work of wickedness. Let her kill her heart. Let her be loud and adulterous. Let her be covered with jewels and rich garments, and let her be shameless before all men. Then will I lift her to pinnacles of power. Then will I breed from her a child mightier than all the kings of the earth. I will fill her with joy. With my force shall she see and strike at the worship of Nu. She shall achieve Hadit. So this whole thing is happening in the Book of the Law. And a lot of people don't understand like what's going on with the Book of the Law because, to be fair, it's very poetic and hard to parse. And people interpret this as a description of how Thelemite women should behave. And let me just say, wow. Okay, this is not talking about how Thelemite women should be. This is talking about how this specific spiritual office should be. When we're discussing Thelemite women, the only way that they should be is as thou wilt. So we're going to come back to this idea of what Thelemite women are called to do and be. I want to put that aside for a second, and I want to discuss what those words kind of mean in a broader sense. So it's talking about the Scarlet Woman adorning herself with jewels and rich garments. And I sort of see this, not to be a center of pestilence, but I sort of see this as a woman living with pride and celebration of self. This is in direct opposition of the old Aeonic idea that women should be reserved and shrink themselves to be in an inferior role to men. Phyllis Seckler notes in her book, which one? I have it here. So I'm going to be I'm going to be sourcing Phyllis Seckler from these two books. Highly recommend them. They're fantastic. So Phyllis Seckler notes that she interprets these jewels and rich garments as referencing accomplishments of the Scarlet Woman. So she is without shame before all men. Because of her accomplishments, she now has pride in herself. Christianity, for example, has long been at war with the sexually liberated woman. And the Scarlet Woman, in her visceral and open celebration of eroticism, I would argue, and I do argue, was necessary to break the chains of the old Aeon to usher in the new Aeon. So here is a quote from Crowley. This bad boy comes from, it comes from the Magical and Philosophical Commentaries on the Book of the Law, and this is the John Simons and Kenneth Grant edition, in which Crowley says, I, the Beast 666, am called to shew this worship and to send it forth into the world. By my woman called the Scarlet Woman, who is any woman that receives and transmits my solar word and being, is this my work achieved. For without woman, man hath no power. So again, this isn't talking about every woman, it's talking specifically about the Scarlet Woman. But those are Crowley's words on it. And let's return back to this idea that is too often misunderstood of the Thelemite woman and the Scarlet Woman. And I think this is worth exploring. So a lot of Thelemites, or I just say people in general, have their own cute or colloquial understanding or language around this. So you will sometimes see Thelemites call their significant other a Scarlet Woman. This is their own personal choice and is not reflective of a canonical, well, I'm using that in a tongue-in-cheek way, but it's not reflective of like how Crowley viewed it. It's not reflective of how other people have viewed this concept. It's their own thing. And again, like, if you want to get creative with language and do your own thing, that's your own thing. But it's important for new people to understand that Thelemite women are not Scarlet women. So when you read these things calling for the Scarlet women to be this specific way, that's not a call for all women to do this. And it's very toxic and very concerning, which is why I was like, wow, I need to sit down and like record my thoughts on this. So this idea that like in the new aeon, so if you are someone who accepts the book of the law and seeks to know and do your will, and this includes men and women and all gender variations under the sun, then you're a Thelemite. So, in other words, to be a Thelemite woman means to fully embrace your divine nature as it is. We need to be careful not to jump from one suffocating set of rigid expectations of women that was previously, oh, you must be modest, you must be chaste, you must be quiet, you must be demure, you must be subservient. To jump right into the new aeon and force ourselves to be something we are not, and to force ourselves to now wear a new mantle that is dominant, aggressive, hypersexual, polyamorous. There is nothing about being a Thelemite that requires you to be hypersexual, polyamorous, any of these things. That's up to you. Now, if that is within your nature as a person, cool, that's awesome. But it doesn't have to be. When it comes to how you should be as a woman or any person in the new aeon, the only valid way to be is yourself. It is in this freedom of the new aeon that we must honor ourselves and be careful to not substitute one oppressive way of being for another. Don't allow other people to push you into a mold or society at large, or force yourself into something where you don't belong. The challenge is to rise up and embrace who you are. And I feel like I've really pushed home that point well enough. So if you notice when I was talking about these spiritual positions of the beast, singular Crowley, it was just Crowley his whole life, and then I was rattling off all these different Scarlet women, it's interesting and perhaps problematic that there was only one beast, but yet for some reason lots of different Scarlet women. So let's talk about that. Let's explore different ideas. And I'm not saying any of these ideas are correct, but they're things to perhaps think about. And it's that perhaps, well, first of all, a lot of Thelemites just sort of accept that Crowley was the spokesperson of the divine, and thus, of course, why wouldn't he know which people were the Scarlet women and not? But also, it's possible that for these women to come in and out of this position during Crowley's life, that when they were with Crowley, there was a special connection that brought out attributes of the Scarlet Woman to do this work, promulgating the law, to do this divine work with Crowley. And then once they split up, that connection was freed, it was released, and those attributes were no longer present on this mortal earth. That's plausible. Phyllis Seckler asserts that the Scarlet Woman is the essence of Nuit and Babylon, and it is a concept that's beyond anyone's understanding. So, Leah Hersig herself, after being removed from the role of Scarlet Woman by Crowley, suggested that the Scarlet Woman should not solely be defined by Crowley's whim, that just because Crowley wanted to move on, maybe he got it wrong. And it's possible that Crowley himself did not understand the full scope and ramifications of this sacred position as Scarlet Woman. But perhaps he knew exactly what he was doing. And perhaps the reality of it was holding these divine offices of Beast and Scarlet Woman was like grabbing a live wire, magically speaking. So Crowley himself grabbed onto this Beast role, and maybe he was just so cooked already that, like, sure, he can stay as Beast, but like women needed to come in and out of it because they needed to take a break from handling all that heat of that magic and that current. But yeah, I think these are all important ideas to explore of like what it means to be a Scarlet Woman. Another interesting thing about Phyllis Seckler's idea is that she asserts that the Scarlet Woman, at least in the very least idea of it, needs to be a woman who has knowledge and conversation of the holy guardian angel, and then beyond that needs to have very specific spiritual attributes. And she says that Jane Wolfe came very close to that. But a lot of the other women, for example, Rose Kelly, Crowley's first wife, she wasn't into the occult. She was not doing this work. Like, she was not interested in it. So you could make the argument that she did not have knowledge and conversation. So she perhaps did not fill this role of Scarlet Woman, or you can understand it as these women filled parts of the role of Scarlet Woman, or perhaps they only filled this role while with Crowley and that magical link was established. There's a lot of ways of thinking about this, but I think the take-home point here isn't to just take everything on its surface level, but to take it a little deeper. And I hope that you question things and you re-examine them, and you re-examine this idea of the Scarlet Woman, because ultimately it's the story of spirituality, the Aeon of Horus, of magic itself being told. And being able to interact with these concepts on a deeper level. So I hope this was a helpful exploration for all of you. I hope we've cleared up an understanding of the Scarlet Woman as just simply being my girlfriend or just a Thelemite woman. It's not. It's its own thing. Nobody would come to me and be like, oh, you were born the Baphomet. You are the Baphomet. I mean, that sounds weird, right? And so from my ears, when someone is like, oh, you're a Scarlet Woman, it sounds equally weird than proclaiming someone to be the Baphomet randomly. I don't know. I think if someone is going to proclaim me some abstract spiritual thing, I would want to be a harpy. So I'm just putting it out there in the universe. I would like to be the physical embodiment of the harpy and shriek. I'm just kidding. But anyways, yeah, I really do appreciate all of your comments from all of you, and it's been so inspiring to do all of these videos and make it a resource for people. And I just really want to inspire people to go out there and embrace who they are, to go read, to go a little bit deeper. And I really hope this was a helpful conversation for you. I appreciate everyone's support. So go do good work. Thank you, everyone. And as always, I am the center of expression for the primal will to good, and so are you.